Do you know the 14 traits of successful chiropractors? We've interviewed some of the top chiropractors in the industry and have identified the common traits that they all share. Jump on over to www.chirobusinessmojo.com to get your free report today.
Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
Yes, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Hello once again, and thanks so much for spending some of your day with me. Well, today on the show, I've got Dr. Jason Gerard. He has a Doctorate of Chiropractic degree from Northwestern College of Chiropractic, and he's been a speaker at Parker Seminars and an international speaker as well. He's a member of the USA Wellness Advisory Council for Wrestling, Judo, and Weightlifting, and is president of ChiroMission Inc, a not-for-profit organization that helps raise funds and provides health care for the less fortunate in countries such as Haiti, the Dominican Republic, St. Vincent, and more. Welcome, Dr. Jason Gerard.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about the why. Why did you become a chiropractor?
Well, when I was young, I was actually into, I was a big sports guy. I was particularly a big hockey player, and I was scouted Division I college hockey as a goaltender. And the season before the actual scouts were going to quote unquote pick me or choose me, I received a football injury going up to catch a ball, and long story short, got flipped in the air catching a ball, landed on my back, and it affected not only my spine, but my breathing became terrible. And long story short, I developed this condition called exercise-induced asthma, lived off an inhaler at 16, 17, 18 years old, was told the rest of my life that was my life. And so that Division I college hockey dream didn't take. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, if I can't be in the field or on the ice, I'll be on the bench or, on the sidelines, and started to develop an interest in sports, the sports medical field. And someone had actually talked to me and told me about this thing called chiropractic, and I thought I'd go check it out. So I ended up going to check it out and ended up visiting a chiropractor who I had my asthma inhaler in my pocket actually. And, I'm watching him work all day long because, I needed it, quote unquote, in case of a moment or a trouble. And he laid me on the table and literally said, if when we're done here, if you need that asthma inhaler after we're done, I wish you the best. And if you don't, you just found your profession. And so, of course, long story short, I found my profession, and that asthma inhaler is sitting in a landfill in central Minnesota for probably the last 25 years.
Wow, what an inspiring story, and not a necessarily altogether unfamiliar one. I think many of us have come to the profession through some sort of injury, and it set us on a completely life-changing path.
Absolutely.
Well, you're also involved in something called ChiroMission. Can you tell us about that and your involvement with it?
Well, I'm the president of ChiroMission, one of the longest standing and largest chiropractic mission groups in the world. So we've served now just under 1 million people that we've taken care of. And really the purpose of ChiroMission is to take the chiropractor, staff, volunteers, students, public at large, and go serve in a capacity in a region where they don't get health care, they don't get, for sure, chiropractic care. And we actually get the chance not only to deliver chiropractic, but we get the chance to deliver a message the way that we believe chiropractic should be from what I would call the correct way. And not only is it taken fire, but at the same time, we've been able to make massive impact in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives.
How many trips a year do you take?
ChiroMission itself takes at least 3 trips a year unless we sponsor private groups. So at bare minimum, we do 3 trips a year.
Wow, what a great cause. Well, thank you so much for serving in that capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to get down to brass tacks of the business side of running a chiropractic practice. After all, this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. So tell us about your practice today.
Well, when I began with a model that I wanted to be a family-based, wellness-based, cash-based practice. And I wanted to create the largest practice in my state of Minnesota. And so when we started, now almost 18 years ago, or 17 or 18 years ago, we we started with that. I figured if I was going to make it, I was going to make it on my terms. I wasn't going to concede to things like insurances or finances that were something other than what I felt was congruent with what I had learned. And so, we created really a solid, large, high volume family wellness based practice, large percentage of kids, a large percentage of retention. And that was kind of the last part. That's kind of the unique factor in our practice is we do one thing. I always say you have to do one thing better than everyone else. And we made our goal retention. Retention, that's something that our field struggles with a lot. But there's a saying that says they stay, they pay, and they refer. But a lot of people always skip to the pay and the refer part, but they forget the fact that they have to first stay. And if you really want to make a life impact in a person's health and their life, they actually have to stay. And so we've been really proud to be able to create that kind of practice. And so it's not uncommon that someone's been there, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and just comes because they just get adjusted.
So how long has your practice been around?
We've been here since 1999.
All right. And is it just the one location or do you have multiple?
Just the one location.
All right. And is it just you?
No, I have two other doctors with me. Actually, I have one preceptor and one associate doctor.
Okay. Well, I really like the model that you're talking about. One of the things I think that I hear a lot is that doctors are always focused on that next new patient and they forget all about retaining the patient they have there. And what a great way to provide value to the lives of the people that are already in the clinic. In addition, there's the income that comes from that. But changing lifestyles and it's such an ongoing thing. It's such a great practice model.
Well, and true. And if you think about it, think about how long you and I took to be able to quote unquote get it. I thought my first adjustment, it was an awesome adjustment and it did some pretty cool things. But if you would have told me 25 years ago or 20 years ago that I was, going to be coming on a preventative, proactive basis, I think if I was 18 years old, I'd be lying to you if I actually told you that was actually on my mind, let alone on my radar.
Yeah, and I was in the same spot when I was that age too. I mean, I think we all are in one way or another. Let me ask you this. If I'm a patient and I'm coming in there, because I know in my office, kind of what I go for in terms of a patient experience. What's it like for a patient coming in from really how they first meet you online or if they talk to someone, a CA when they call, to how they become a member and all of the things you address in your practice?
Well, a lot of people like to call that the difference between no offense to the hotel system, but the Motel 6 versus the Ritz-Carlton experience. So, I mean, I really believe, and we train, very heavy with my team on the fact of the first impression is the most important impression. And so how they're greeted, you obviously know their name. You obviously should know why they walked into the office. That's just the starting grounds because, again, in the first 10 seconds, people literally have made up their mind, is this the right place for me? And it's not something they necessarily say. It's something that they feel. And that feeling doesn't change very easily. Even if they go back and have a wow doctor's experience, they still have that feeling that doesn't necessarily get lost. So that's the most important part. But again, as a team of doctors, myself, I mean, we are looking at separating ourselves to saying, listen, we do one thing different here from anywhere else you've been. And that is if we can get to the cause of why you are here, whatever that cause is, whether it's wellness or headaches or whatever the problem is, if we can get to the cause, you're in the right place. And if they think that there's someone who not only can get to the cause but has an answer, they're going to not only be open-minded, they're going to be excited, and they're going to be more apt to commit to whatever commitment equals.
I love your analogy to the service industry and hotels. I really think that that's probably a mindset shift for a lot of chiropractors, and that when we come out of school, we're really focusing on healing the world and don't realize there's a whole really sort of unromantic, unsexy side of it, which is we are in the service industry, and how well we take care of someone really is something that people perceive, and that's going to be the first, the hook, if you will, that brings people in.
Well, not only that, but, because things are so changing and the demands for what people have changed, you can't just be like everybody else unless you want them to view you like everybody else. There's something that has to be over and above the call of duty that exists within inside your office. And again, most people are so inundated with messages and marketing and so many things. You really got to stand out and really create that wow experience so that they're like, you're just not another medical office. In fact, the last example I'll give you is I remember when I was a kid, a guy grew up in a pretty traditional medical family or what I would call that. And I remember we went to our medical doctor, and all I remember was the sliding glass door opening and the lady behind it going, basically next, what do you want? And I remember that being okay. I mean, that was acceptable. That was what was the expectation at the time. And now I think of what people want and expect at this stage in life. It's just so drastically different.
Yeah, what a huge opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves, not only from other, sorts of providers, medical providers and so on, but from each other in terms of how well we address that customer experience or patient experience. And you said something else that I wanted to reiterate as well. I think that, because of social media and websites, people have already made up their mind before they've even come in your office, which is not a negative thing. It's actually a good thing in my perception. Would you agree that when they walk in, they've already chosen you?
Critical. And, and I don't necessarily, I'm not in I'm at the edge of the cities where my practice is. And yet even there, and, I get a lot of small town, people, they still, it's rare now that someone hasn't quote unquote checked you out. And again, it's just another thing. It's just this, you're putting together your portfolio of who you are. And I always say a person has really made up their mind by 2 or 3 or 4 different reasons. They've already made up their mind before you even start talking. And so if you're behind the 8 ball and you don't have a website that speaks the way you want it to speak, if you don't have a team that speaks and provides an environment that you want to pay, or an environment you want someone to experience, all of a sudden you're already behind the 8 ball. And as I said before, you literally need to pull a rabbit out of a hat with your doctoring skills back in the room to be able to make them committed.
Yeah, so that initial perception is so critical. Well, so I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. You said that you do not accept insurance. Is that right? You're cash-based?
We're not a provider for any insurance. So probably 90+% of our practice doesn't use any insurance of any kind. We do have some patients that have, say, an auto accident here or there. And we have some union coverages that we might use as an outside source, but it's always a cash insurance combo. But really, minimum, I could probably count them on my hand. So we're really dominated by a cash-based practice.
So give us your thoughts on cash versus insurance. In some regions, I think what I found is that if there's a big employer in town and everyone has that insurance, you're going to lose business if you aren't in that network. But that may be not true, in a different town or state. And you've been very successful, obviously, without taking insurance. So can you tell us a little bit more about the decision that went into that? And maybe, if chiropractors are out there thinking of getting in or for the first time they're setting up their practice and can't decide between the two. Can you talk about that and break those down for us, cash versus insurance?
Well, yeah, I have a lot to say about cash versus insurance in the sense that I remember when I was just getting into practice or starting kind of as a student, I went to a clinic, and I remember I'd worked at like 5 or 6 or 7 different clinics, and it was by choice. I wanted to get a different feel for different environments. And I remember one of the practices I worked at that was pretty insurance dependent. The copay at the time had gone from, on average from $10 to $12 and maybe $2 increase. And I watched dozens upon dozens of people lose it on the staff because the copay had gone up $2. Threatening to leave and I can only go 2 more times, or I can only go next week. And I remember hearing that. And then I remember the other practice I was at where people had found value in paying in advance for whatever that meant. And they were committed. It was just a level of commitment that was different. There was a level of commitment to home care, stretches, exercises, whatever you want to call it. They got to classes more because there was a vested interest. They were more excited to go to lose weight or eat better or change some other element in their health because they had physically put a financial commitment down for that. And here I was looking again at that first clinic, and someone didn't value it for $2 more. And it was at that moment that I looked at it and I said, that's really the difference between cash and insurance. It doesn't mean people are any better or worse or practices are good or bad. I just wanted people to come into my practice because they wanted to be in my practice because they knew the value of what was happening, not because my copay was an affordable copay.
Well, how long is a typical visit for someone who comes in to your office?
We run a high volume practice, so the visits are very short. Probably the longest period of time is waiting as far as getting in. But, really, it doesn't take more than, a minute or less to really perform the chiropractic part. I always say however long it takes you to adjust your family is probably how long it really should take in your practice. And so we try to honor that. I try to treat our patients no different than I would treat my family. So the actual visit doesn't take a long time. There's an education mixed in there. There's as we call it in chiropractic, there's a tick to go along the way most times. But again, those visits, they really don't take a long time to be able to do what we want to do unless there's a special appointment like a re-exam or a re-sign or something like that.
Well, what kind of marketing do you do in your practice, and what's working the best for you these days?
Well, obviously, when you've been around almost 2 decades, referrals is kind of the backbone. Your reputation ends up being 50% or more of your practice. So that's definitely the case. We spent a lot of time working very hard to have a very solid reputation and visibility on Google and internet, and tried to stay up with that. That's made a huge difference. We've had 1,000+ visits a month through our sites, through our site in a town of 17,000 people. So we've been proud of that. But again, we also go out and we speak to the community. We do talks, we do workshops, we do lunch and learns. I do send my team out to do screenings or health assessments. Not as much as we used to. Talks have really been the outreach arm, if you want to call that, where we physically outreach. Because I just think that speaking to people live just does something different than anything else you can do, letting them into your heart and soul. But those are the main things that we've utilized.
Well, you're certainly doing something right, because I was, in researching for this interview, I saw that you have 71 Google reviews. That is a lot. I think I have like 24, and I thought that was a lot. So how did you get that?
Well, actually, I'm embarrassed about that number. I used to have 150, but Google pulled off about 80 of them one day when they changed their algorithms. So actually, that number for me is embarrassing, because it should be twice that number, but Google is notorious. I have a saying at this level where you put one Google review up, you pull 3 others if you don't be careful. So, I just made it a point of, one of the things that a Google review represents to me, a lot of doctors do it just to get more reviews so that other people can come in, and that's fine, and obviously that's part of the objective. But if you really understand the magic in what a review is, that's the person's chance to put down on a piece of paper their experience. And there's something that's done when someone physically puts it down and shares it with the world. There's a commitment to what's happened, and there's maybe even for the patient, there's an eye-opening element to, holy smokes, I didn't even think about this. Do you know I also haven't had a headache in 3 months? And oh, by the way, do you know I also haven't taken any Tums for 2 years? And there's this analysis that happens that once you share it, that just makes a commitment to the patient. So I almost look at my Google reviews as much of a retention tool as an attraction tool.
So do you actively solicit those reviews? Do you, ask one patient a week for a review or something like that? Or are they so in love with the practice that on their own they do it? Because that happens as well.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you that every one of those 150 or whatever reviews throughout the years have done it on their own, but that's obviously not true. I do give them guidelines. I typically look at, re-exams are a great analysis tool for someone's excitement. Anyone who's just plain excited about where they're at, that's obviously an excellent time. They're an open book. They want to share it to the world, and I just give them a vehicle to be able to do that. I say, listen, this is the best place in today's marketplace for you to share to the planet. And there's just nothing that reaches more people. So if you're looking to reach more people, here's the steps X, Y, Z. And again, most do. You do get some that, promise you that they're going to, and you promise you 10 more times they're going to do it. But in general, that's the best way.
Well, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, and that is the Hilton versus the Motel 6 experience. When I was looking at your website, I was really struck by two things with your videos. Number one, they had really high production values, and we're sort of in the age now, of the selfie live Facebook video feed, and I really liked the production values that you have, because they are that, it's demonstrating that this is a step up experience from the average. And the other thing that I really liked was that it wasn't all you talking, and nothing against you, but I think a lot of chiropractors out there sort of have, hey, me, and these were the real patients giving their real experience, which I think is ultimately more powerful than the doctor saying, look at me, I'm fantastic. So tell us about those videos. Were there something you produced in-house, or did you hire a company to do this? Why do they look so good?
Well, I am, as my staff knows, I learned how to do a group email just 2 years ago, so I'm computer illiterate.
Okay.
So I'm going to take absolutely no credit other than the ideas that I had to the actual physical production. But one of the great things of ChiroMission, so on the ChiroMission board is all essentially chiropractors, but we have one person who's the public at large. His name is Jeff Cobelli. And he does what is called Good For You Productions. And so we've watched, if you've ever looked at ChiroMission, and I encourage all of you listening to check out ChiroMission. We always have our videos, and he's always the guy that puts together the quote-unquote chiropractic experience, or the ChiroMission experience. And so I'm watching him do this amazing videos and catching the emotional side of things. And I'm like, I just have to have this guy out of my office about every 2 years. So I just make it a goal every 2 years that we come out and we produce something new. And whether it's patient testimonials, whether that's sharing, an experience through me, we wanted high content, but we wanted high value. And that's exactly what our goal is, which is, again, I want you to look at us and say, this looks like something different. And if I can get different out of you and I can get higher level, that's what we wanted. Again, that's what makes our videos great. So I have absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the video, but I will take full credit for it if it comes to it.
Well, mission accomplished in terms of really standing out from the crowd with the videos. And we'll definitely link to ChiroMission and to your video producer's website in our show notes. Let's talk a little bit about your success. I want to ask this in two parts. Why do you think you've been so successful, and why isn't everyone a successful chiropractor?
Well, I think the first thing is, especially in today's world, is I think everybody, if you ask anyone, I find it rare that anyone wouldn't say they don't want to be successful. And I've probably had now over 100 students and doctors at some point that have trained, gone through, visited, maybe 200 by now. It's kind of crazy how that is because of what we see, and we see a lot of people. And so we tend to attract that. And everyone, if you ask them, wants to be successful, but very few people do what it takes to be successful. In other words, it's one thing to say it, but then, action kind of separates the majority of people out there. I mean, I remember when I started, I went door to door, and that would be unheard of now. But back in the day, I went door to door to 250, 500,000, whatever houses. And, I did it for one reason, and I did it because I knew that no one else would do it. And I learned a lot about myself at that moment. I mean, it was challenging. I was scared. I remember driving up and down my very, very first road, an hour, one single street. And the fact the cops didn't get called and there wasn't a creeper in the road, driving by, the fact that I didn't get in trouble for that's amazing. But I remember this old lady walked out, drove up to her driveway, walked out of her car. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that old lady surely can't shoot me down. She can't be that mean. She looks very nice. And, it wasn't until I had the guts to walk to her door. And of course she was nice. And what was really crazy is yes, it was great to visit a lot of doors. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you I got 700 new patients from it. But what it did is it created something in me that said that if I'm willing to go door to door and I'm willing to commit that, then when I'm in my practice, this is going to be practice on my terms, and I'm willing to do what it takes. And so that tone was set initially right away from that moment. And I made that commitment, and it stayed with me because I just think that most people in today's world don't realize that it's not easy. It's hard, and you're going to be challenged. And if you look at your challenges like failures, then you'll quit. And if you look at your challenges and your losses like true wins, then you're going to only get better. So I think that that's a good start to see the difference between being successful and not. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, great advice. Sounds like, if I could summarize, to get out of your comfort zone and do it repeatedly. until you get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Well, this podcast is all about providing actionable content for our listeners to help them out. And we've got an audience made up of new docs or those who are getting ready to graduate, and then experienced docs who are maybe stuck and looking for something different, a way to grow beyond where they are today. So what advice would you have? Let's break it down first for the new doc and then for the doc who's stuck and looking for a change.
Well, first of all, if you're new and you're starting from scratch, I mean, you've got to have a plan laid out. That, I would say that you're going to visit XYZ number of people, whether it's businesses, whether it's, again, door to door, whether it's screenings, whether it's talks. I mean, you're committing to reach, I would say, a large percent. I'm talking 1,000 plus people before you walk into practice. And there should be a 90-day goal for that. That should be a buildup. So it might start off, I'll say in the 90 days, maybe more casual in the sense that you're more collecting information. And by the time you get to the final, let's say 3-4 weeks, you have multiple events happening at the same time. And, I should not say at the same time, but in the same week, so that you literally start the beginning. You're literally running from the moment you start. I mean, you've done it right when your first week in your office is zany and you're freaked out because you're film this or you're digital something that's when you've done your job right. But it should start with that mixed in with a heavy dose of training so that when that all does come together, you actually have systems and a philosophy and a pattern to be able to make that work. So I think that's the first and the most important thing that comes out to someone new. That's just simply that they're just not going to come to you without you meeting them first. I think someone who's more of an established doctor that maybe things aren't going right or you're stuck, I really think we need to take a look at ourselves and make a recommitment and say to ourselves, there's obviously something that happened in our passion. So the first thing you have to do is reignite and redefine where that passion went. And whether that's audio tapes, whether that's seminars, whether that's surrounding yourself in a weekly training with a group of people that represent what you represent or you at least want to represent, that's a start. But then the bottom line, it's no different than a new doctor. You just got to get out there. The number one problem I see with the doctors that have been out and around is that they just don't want to go do anything anymore. They just like, I'm above that, or I don't like that. This is not my thing. I mean, believe me, the world of comfort is going to be the single greatest thing that holds you back. So I look at it and I say to myself, we've had those times in our practice. Man, I'll set up a couple of talks. One of the talks might be at a place that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, but boy, just that energy, even if that talk fails in my mind or I don't get anything from it or nobody walks through the door, all of a sudden I come back to my office and I have 4 new ones in the book and I don't know how that happened. The world is weird how energy works. When you've accepted the idea that you want to grow, the world will provide it to you. The universe provides that to you. And so I think that that's where I'd really start from, whether it's the doctors or the students.
Yeah, great advice. Put yourself out there and let the universe do its work as well. Well, I want to shift now and talk about the bigger picture of success. And you've obviously been very successful, and we learn a lot from success, but we learn even more from our failures. Can you take us back to a challenge or an obstacle that you've had in your life, the lessons you learned, and how you overcame that?
Sure. Well, there's been a million of the challenges that have been there. I think one of the ones that really one of the biggest things, and I think this speaks a lot to maybe newer doctors. If you've been a seasoned doctor, you maybe can smile at this, but I think when you get out, I struggled a lot in the fact that I loved chiropractic. I wanted everyone to have it, but I had to create a team under me that respected and loved it like I did. I had to become a leader of a team. That transition from just, when I started, it was kind of like one of these things where I'm like, well, of course, I'm paying you to work for me, so you should just love what I love. And I remember there was this big disconnection between what I called the doctoring side and the staff side. And we had this, it was a push-pull thing where we could never, we'd get stuck or we wouldn't grow where we wanted to, but it wouldn't be a unified voice. And I remember it was always because it was initially about my vision. Once I got that there was more than me involved, and once I got through that challenge, And once I started to identify that the greatest thing that could happen inside my office is I could build leaders within my team, and that was really what my goal was. And together we would reach more people. Once I got that, that's where the volume and the changes really happened, was when I realized it wasn't just about my vision, that I needed them and they needed me. And, because there was a lot of people that, probably early employees that left me that probably didn't love me, and they probably shouldn't have, because I definitely didn't care as much about them as I cared about growth. And once I changed that vision to, yes, we need growth, but yes, we need a team that grows, that's really where the success happened. And I think that's important as a new doc, because you get so stuck into just, I want to see this many, I want to help this many a week, and this many things happening, but you tend to forget you leave people behind you when you go for that goal.
Well, when you think of the word success, who do you think of and why?
Well, I think it depends. I've been asked this plenty of times before. And what's interesting is, we all want to name like famous people, and whether Gandhi this or Mother Teresa that, and, all these famous people. And true, that by many aspects you could argue success. To me, success is the people that I love success stories of people that you never hear of. I love success where you look at a mom who's single, who's living off a single income, that successfully raises 4 kids. I don't know how she does it. I'm always impressed with someone who has been in practice for 25 years that maybe doesn't stand on a stage. Maybe he or she doesn't get commended. But you know what? Their people love them, and they've been with them for 25 years. I'm always impressed with success, because success is so hard to quantify in the sense, it depends on the area, but it's an all around person who accomplishes the goals that they have for their life and their dreams, and they do it on their terms. They don't change who they are. They don't necessarily change who they represent to meet those goals. They do it because that's what the right thing is. And again, I love people who don't get necessarily recognized. To me, though, the real success in life are the people that don't always get recognized.
Yeah, those unsung heroes that are doing the right thing even when no one's really looking are incredibly impressive, and I'm glad that you appreciate them because they're important role models. Well,
absolutely.
Do you have any daily habits or rituals, affirmations, things you do every day to help you become successful or maintain success?
Well, I really think one of the great things about ChiroMission, not to keep talking about ChiroMission, is that we try to teach people what I call a day in the life of a servant leader. And so kind of following in what that day looks like for myself, kind of connecting it, first off, my faith and my prayer, with the book, I open up the Bible when I start my day, and I get my head right. And I start with something positive. That does move into affirmations. That's the morning beginning. Kind of cool at ChiroMission, we do what I call green book trainings in the morning. And if you're not familiar with green books, those are the foundational books on where chiropractic began, and the thoughts of some of our leaders that started chiropractic care, and at least the concept of chiropractic. And we do what's called green book training. So whether I'm by myself or at a trip, green books put my body and my mind in the right spirit. I think that those have been critical. And then, of course, we call it the workout. You got to get your body moving too. So, you put those 3 or 4 things together, your mind's right, your heart's right, your spirit's right, your energy's right, and now you're ready to start the day. And that's what a day, in my opinion, should look like on the vast majority of days. I know most of us, none of us are perfect. We'd all be lying if we said we started every day that way. But at the same time, I know when I'm not doing that, I'm not right. There's something that's not right in me that I have to quote unquote catch up. And that's never right, because you could have skipped 3 people in your office until you quote unquote were in the zone. And so that would be what a day looks like for me. And one other important thing that people tend to neglect, I do in the middle part of the day. I've always been trained in the middle part of the day to do kind of a mini version of what you start your day as. It might not be as long, but you get a lot of bullets thrown your way. You get a lot of challenges sent your way. And it's really easy to get lost throughout the day and forget what you started your day at. So I try to do what I call a mini checkup, almost a mini, daily afternoon prep, because again, you're only halfway through your day and it's going to take you to be in that zone again to be able to finish the night.
Well, in addition to the green books you mentioned, are there any other books or a favorite book you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I've been a little bit behind the times, but I recently had a chance to read. I always call it my new favorite book, until next week, my new favorite book. But I finally got a chance to read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and I thought that was absolutely excellent, and I just liked what it stood for. I liked what it said, and I was able to pull so much from that. So I would call that my new favorite book.
Well, I will post a link to that on our show notes, and that's definitely on my to-read list. I haven't gotten to it yet, but a number of folks who have been on the show have recommended that one. And, I find myself explaining the why a lot of times to people just because I find out that it matters more to them if they understand the why. So I think it's about time I read the book and understand that a little more deeply.
Absolutely.
Well, what's the best business advice you've ever received?
I think the best business advice that I've ever received is I kind of started to get into this earlier, but to get to success and to be something or change something other than what you truly believe is truly not the definition of success. So the really best business advice I got in my life was just to do it. To do whatever your goals, your vision, your dream is, but to not change who you are and do it on your terms. Do it for the right reasons. Don't alter yourself. Don't listen to, not that you don't listen to coaching and stuff, but don't do what's wrong just to be successful or quote unquote seen in society as success. Do something for the right reason. Then you can step back and say, I did it on my terms. That's
some great advice right there for our listeners. Be authentic. Be you. Because you can put up an act for a while, but it can become exhausting. So just be true.
Everyone crashes. We've seen it. Everybody crashes eventually.
Well, Doc, thanks so much for spending time with us today and allowing us to pick your brain. I think that there's a lot of great stuff in there, some value bombs, some gold nuggets of information you have shared with our listeners. What's the best way for people to contact you or find out more about you, ChiroMission, or anything?
Well, if I just start off with just myself, our clinic, the easiest place to go is to our website, www.lakewoods. That's one word, Lakewoods Chiropractic, all together, lakewoodschiropractic.com. That's probably the easiest way. If you're interested in ever going on a ChiroMission trip, if you want your world rocked and you want to save and change the planet and adjust thousands, that's www.chiromission.com with no S, but chiromission.com. You can also check us out, Lakewoods Chiropractic and ChiroMission on Facebook, on our fan pages, some huge fan pages, and we put some great content out. So those are two ways to get a hold of us.
Dr. Jason Gerard, thank you so much once again for spending your time with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.